I didn't flinch when he stood up at the center of the banquet hall and demanded the deed to my property. What stunned me wasn't the greed in his voice. I'd grown used to that. It was the slap that came from my own wife, Denise. The sound echoed through the elegant banquet hall of the Oak Ridge Country Club, where crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens. 130 pairs of eyes, relatives, friends, business associates, all fixed on my reddening cheek. For God's sake, Henry! Denise's voice trembled with rage rather than shame. Why must you always be so stubborn? My glasses slipped off and clattered onto the polished hardwood floor. I stared at them for a moment, watching the light refract through the lenses. 67 years old, and I'd never been struck by a woman before, certainly not in front of everyone I knew. Brady, my stepson, stood beside his mother like a conquering general, his 6'2" frame towering over her petite figure. He adjusted his expensive tie, bought with my money, and smirked. "Come on, Henry," he said, his voice carrying that rehearsed reasonableness he'd perfected over years of getting his way. "You're not getting any younger. It's time to hand it over to someone who knows what to do with it. The Oak Hill Ranch. My sanctuary. 300 acres of rolling Texas hills, pecan trees, and memories that stretched back 4 decades. The place where I'd buried my first wife, Elizabeth, where my grandchildren had learned to fish and ride horses, and the woman I had married 5 years ago, the woman I'd believed would be my companion through my sunset years, stood there nodding in agreement with her 38-year-old unemployed son. I straightened my jacket, bent down carefully to retrieve my glasses, and slid them back onto my face. The room remained silent, a silence heavy with secondhand embarrassment, with whispers waiting to break free the moment I left. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm, not in rage, but in quiet dignity. I walked toward the exit, my footsteps echoing against marble. Not a single soul followed me out. In the lobby, I nodded to James, the longtime valet who had parked my cars for 20 years. "Everything all right, Mr. Walker?" he asked, concern etched in his weathered face. "It will be," I replied. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. "Clayton, it's Henry Walker. I need you to bring the folder. The updated version, yes, to the Oak Ridge. 30 minutes? Perfect." I hung up and walked outside to the terrace overlooking the golf course. The Texas sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and gold, a stark contrast to the darkness I'd just experienced inside. How had we arrived here? The question echoed in my mind as I retraced the path that had led to this moment. I had built everything from nothing. Born to a mechanic and a waitress in East Texas, I'd worked oil rigs at 18, learned real estate at 27, and by 40, I'd flipped my way into a multi-million-dollar portfolio. I had known struggle, calloused hands, and 16-hour workdays. Elizabeth had been there. Through it all. My high school sweetheart who packed my lunch even when we could afford household staff. When cancer took her 8 years ago, I lost my North Star. For 2 years, I drifted, going through the motions of managing properties, attending board meetings, and enduring family gatherings that felt hollow without her laugh. Then came Denise. She was different from Elizabeth, more refined, worldly, with a grace that came from her years as a gallery curator. I wasn't looking for a replacement. I was looking for companionship. For 3 months, she listened to my stories, asked about my businesses, and seemed genuinely interested in the life I'd built. We married after 2 years of dating. Brady came with the package, a supposed entrepreneur between startups who needed a place to stay. Temporarily. 5 years later, he was still in my guest house, driving my cars and apparently eyeing my property. I checked my watch. 20 more minutes until Clayton arrived. Inside the banquet hall, I knew the whispers had turned to discussions. Family lines were being drawn. The dinner I'd planned as a celebration of our combined families had transformed into something ugly. The terrace. Door opened behind me. "Grandpa?" Maya, my granddaughter from my first marriage, stepped out. At 24, she was the spitting image of her grandmother. Same chestnut hair, same determined chin, same kind eyes. She was finishing her master's in environmental science, her thesis focused on sustainable agriculture. "Are you okay?" she asked, placing a hand on my arm. "I've been better," I admitted. "Did you know this was coming?" She shook her head. "Not the public ambush. But Brady's been talking to Dad and me for weeks, trying to get us to convince you to modernize the ranch. Wanted to turn it into some kind of luxury retreat." She frowned. "I told him to talk to you directly." "And what did he say to that?" That you were too set in your ways, that it would be easier to convince Mom first. She paused. I'm sorry, Grandpa. I patted her hand. You have nothing to be sorry for. What are you going to do now? I looked toward the parking lot where a black Mercedes was pulling in. Clayton Myers, my attorney for over 20 years, stepped out holding a leather portfolio. I'm going to finish the dinner, I said, and make some things clear. Clayton approached, his, silver hair catching the last light of day. He'd been with me through everything. The building of my business, Elizabeth's death, the succession planning for my children and grandchildren. Henry, he said, extending his hand. Are you sure about this? More sure than I've been in 5 years, I replied. We walked back into the lobby together, Clayton briefing me on the document's final provisions. Everything's in order, just as you instructed last month. I nodded, strengthened by the presence of a loyal friend. Let's go in. When we re-entered the banquet hall, the clinking of glasses and awkward whispers died down. All eyes turned to us. Brady and Denise sat at the head table, their faces a mixture of confusion and wariness. I walked up to the podium, where earlier I had planned to toast to family unity. Clayton stood beside me, opening the black leather portfolio. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside. Some of you came for dinner, some came for entitlement, but tonight we'll all leave with clarity. I nodded to Clayton, who stepped forward with the document, my revised will. As he cleared his throat to begin reading, I caught Brady's eyes. His smirk had vanished, replaced by something closer to alarm. Denise reached for her wine glass, her hand visibly trembling. The room held its breath as Clayton spoke the first words that would change everything. Long before that fateful dinner, I had built a life of quiet purpose. The Oak Hill Ranch wasn't just property, it was the physical manifestation of promises I'd made to Elizabeth on our 20th anniversary. Someday, I'd told her as we walked the undeveloped land, our grandchildren will chase fireflies here. She'd smiled, her face already gaunt from the first round of treatments. Then you'd better start planting those pecan trees now, Henry Walker. They take time to grow. I planted 50 that spring. By the time the cancer took her, 3 years later, they were still saplings. Too young to provide shade for her final days, but promised guardians for the generations to come. The main house I built with her input, a sprawling ranch-style home with wide porches and picture windows that captured the sunset. Every detail, from the kitchen island where she'd planned to teach grandchildren to bake, to the library with built-in shelves, for her book collection, or her influence. After her passing, the ranch became my refuge. I'd wake before dawn, make coffee in the quiet kitchen, and watch the Texas hill country come alive. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch rocker she'd loved and talk to her, telling her about our son Daniel's promotion, about Maya's college scholarship, about the way little Daniel Jr. had her same dimple when he smiled. For 2 years I lived this way, managing my properties during the day, returning to memories at night. My children worried, but I assured them I was fine. Not happy, perhaps, but content in the rhythm I'd established. Then I met Denise at a charity auction for the local hospital. She'd been organizing the art displays, elegant in a navy dress, her silver-streaked dark hair swept into a chignon. We spoke briefly about a landscape painting I was considering. It captures something essential about the hill country light, she'd said, her knowledge impressive. The artist studied with Richard Schmid. You can see his influence in the brushwork. I bought the painting and asked her to dinner the following week. Our courtship was measured, respectful of the ghosts that still occupied the rooms of my heart. She never tried to replace Elizabeth. Instead, she carved her own space. Tell me about her, she'd say, and I would. She listened with what I took for genuine interest. When she first visited the ranch, she admired it with what seemed like understanding. This place is your soul on display, Henry, she'd said, running her hand along the porch railing. I can feel how much love went into building it. 2 years after we met, I proposed. The wedding was small, family and close friends at the ranch, under the pecan trees that had finally grown tall enough to cast dappled shadows. Brady came to the wedding alone, shook my hand firmly, and told me how happy he was for his mother. At 33, he had the polished appearance of success. Tailored suit, confident smile, firm handshake. He spoke of his latest venture, an app for boutique hotel bookings that was about to secure second-round funding. Denise had raised him alone after his father abandoned them when Brady was 10. She'd worked multiple jobs to put him through private school and then an Ivy League education. Her pride in him was palpable, and I admired the sacrifices she'd made. He just needs a little time to find his footing, she'd explained when, 3 months after our wedding, he asked if he could stay in our guest house temporarily after his apartment lease ended. The startup world is so volatile. This would really help him focus on his next project. I agreed readily. The guest house sat 100 yards from the main home, with its own driveway and entrance. It seemed a reasonable arrangement, one that would give us privacy while allowing him to save money during a transitional period. The first year of marriage brought adjustments, but also genuine pleasure. Denise revitalized the gardens, hosted dinner parties that filled the house with laughter, and seemed to enjoy the quiet rhythms of ranch life. Brady kept largely to himself, occasionally joining us for Sunday dinners or helping with ranch maintenance. It was during the second year that I began noticing subtle shifts. Brady's temporary stay extended without discussion. His startup ventures never materialized into actual employment. When I gently inquired about his plans, Denise would intervene. He's networking, Henry. In his industry, it's all about connections and timing. Then came the small intrusions. Denise began attending meetings with my property managers, uninvited but explaining her presence as interest in learning the business. Brady started offering suggestions for ranch improvements that would require significant investment. You could develop the north section into luxury cabins, he'd say over dinner. Turn it into a high-end retreat. I know people who could manage the whole project. I'd smile and change the subject. The north section was where Elizabeth and I had planned to create a wildlife sanctuary. The comments grew more frequent, more pointed. You don't need all that land, Henry. At your age, wouldn't it be easier to let someone else handle the day-to-day operations? We should build something fresh on your legacy. I recognized the pattern but didn't want to believe what it suggested. When you've lived as long as I had, you learn to differentiate between genuine concern and calculated interest. This wasn't concern. Then, 6 months before the family dinner, I caught Brady in my study, rifling through my file cabinet. Just looking for a stapler, he'd explained, not quite meeting my eyes. The next week, I noticed my mail had been opened before. I received it. Property tax statements, bank correspondence, letters from my attorney. I installed a small safe in my closet for important documents, changed the passwords on my accounts, started taking business calls in my truck rather than the house. My son Daniel noticed the tension during a Sunday visit. Dad, is everything okay with you and Denise? He asked as we walked the property line, checking fences. Why do you ask? I deflected. She seems different, more interested in the business side of things. And Brady called me last week asking about the trust arrangements for the kids. I stopped walking. He what? Daniel frowned. Asked if I knew how Maya and Daniel Jr.'s trusts were structured. Said he was just curious about estate planning. I told him it wasn't his business. That evening, I called Clayton and asked him to prepare an updated will. Just as a precaution, I told myself. Just to be sure. 3 weeks before the dinner, I overheard a phone conversation that confirmed my worst suspicions. Brady was on the back patio of the guest house, voice carrying in the still evening air as I returned from checking the horses. Once I get the deed signed, I'm converting the ranch into a luxury retreat. He's just holding on to it out of spite. No, Mom's handling him. She knows how to get him to see reason. I stood frozen among the shadows of the trees Elizabeth and I had planted together. The betrayal felt physical, a hollowing out of my chest where trust had lived. That night, I finalized the changes to my will with Clayton. Are you sure about this, Henry? He'd asked. It's a significant revision. I'm sure, I replied. The ranch was always meant for those who would respect what it stands for. The family dinner was planned as a celebration. My 70th birthday approaching, 5 years of marriage to Denise. The announcement of Maya's engagement to her longtime boyfriend. I'd intended to surprise everyone with news of the family trust I was establishing generous provisions for all, including Denise. Instead, it became the stage for an ambush I hadn't anticipated, but, in retrospect, should have seen coming. As Clayton prepared to read the updated will in that stunned banquet hall, I looked around at the faces of those gathered. Some showed shock, others curiosity. A few, those who knew me best, displayed something close to understanding. My gaze settled finally on Brady, whose confident smirk had disappeared entirely, replaced by a dawning realization that he had miscalculated. Badly. Clayton's voice carried across the silent banquet hall with the authority of law itself. Every eye in the room fixed on him as he adjusted his reading glasses and began. I, Henry James Walker, being of sound mind and body, do hereby Revoke all prior wills and codicils and declare this to be my last will and testament. I watched Brady's face, noting how his jaw tightened. Denise reached for her water glass, her hand visibly trembling. First, Clayton continued, regarding the Oak Hill Ranch, including all 300 acres, the main residence, outbuildings, and all livestock therein. The pause that followed seemed to stretch into eternity. I could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning, the clink of ice in someone's glass, the almost imperceptible sound of Denise's breathing beside me. I hereby place said property into an irrevocable trust for the sole benefit of Maya Elizabeth Walker and Daniel Walker Jr., my biological grandchildren. Gasps rippled through the room. Brady's face flushed crimson, and Denise's hand froze mid-air, water glass suspended in shock. The trust shall be managed by Daniel Walker Sr. until such time as Maya Walker reaches the age of 30, at which point joint management will transfer to both beneficiaries. Under no circumstances shall any control, benefit, or interest in the property transfer to Denise Walker or Brady Lewis, nor any of their heirs or assigns. Clayton turned the page, his voice steady and matter-of-fact, as if he weren't detonating a bomb in the center of my family's expectations. Furthermore, regarding my real estate holdings, including the Greenway properties and Hillcrest Lakeview estates, Brady stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, his practiced charm evaporating. "You can't do this, Henry. We had an understanding." I met his gaze calmly. "We had no such understanding, Brady. You promised me," he began, but I cut him off. "I promised you temporary housing 5 years ago, nothing more." Denise grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my sleeve. "Henry, please," she hissed. "Don't do this. We can talk about this privately." I gently removed her hand. "We're well past private conversations, Denise. You made this public when you slapped me in front of our guests." Clayton cleared his throat, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the tension crackling through the room. "Shall I continue, Henry?" I nodded. "Please do. The aforementioned commercial properties shall be placed in a separate trust with 50% of proceeds directed to the Elizabeth Walker Memorial Foundation for Foster Youth and 50% to be distributed equally between Daniel Walker Sr. and his children." Maya, seated at a table with her fiancé, covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with surprise. My son Daniel sat straighter, his expression a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. All liquid assets, including bank accounts, investment portfolios, and retirement funds currently totaling approximately $4.2 million, shall be distributed as follows. Brady interrupted again, this time addressing the room at large. "Can't you all see what's happening here? He's a bitter old man punishing his wife and her son out of spite. This is elder abuse. He's not thinking clearly." Clayton paused, folding his hands over the document. "Mr. Lewis, I've been Mr. Walker's attorney for over 20 years. I can assure everyone present that he is of completely sound mind. Furthermore, these changes were made weeks ago, not in response to tonight's incident." Brady's face contorted with rage. "You planned this," he said, turning to me. "You set us up." "No, Brady," I replied, keeping my voice even. "I simply prepared for what I suspected might happen. You confirmed my suspicions tonight." "This is outrageous," Denise said, rising to stand beside her son. "After everything I've done for you, Henry, 5 years of marriage, of caring for you, of making that empty house a home again." "That empty house was already a home," I said quietly. "It was filled with memories and love long before you arrived. And if you truly cared for me, you wouldn't be standing there defending a son who just tried to pressure me into signing away my property in front of our entire family." The room had divided into clear factions. Most of my older friends and business associates sat in uncomfortable silence. My relatives from Elizabeth's side watched with a mixture of sympathy and vindication. Denise's friends huddled together, whispering behind hands and shooting accusatory glances my way. "Mr. Walker," Clayton said, "shall I finish the reading?" I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of my years. This wasn't how I'd envisioned spending my 70th birthday month. I'd hoped for peace, for family harmony, for the comfort of knowing my affairs were in order without the drama of public confrontation. Clayton resumed reading, detailing smaller bequests to longtime employees, friends, and charitable causes. With each item, it became clearer that Denise and Brady had been almost entirely written out of my legacy. When he finished, he closed the portfolio and addressed the room. This concludes the reading of Mr. Walker's current will. As with any legal document, it can be amended in the future should circumstances warrant. Brady laughed bitterly. Oh, we'll do more than amend it. We'll contest it. Every word. Clayton smiled thinly. You're welcome to try, Mr. Lewis. However, I should mention that Mr. Walker has undergone comprehensive cognitive and psychological evaluation within the past month, specifically to address any concerns about his capacity. The results are on file and quite definitive. Additionally, this will contain a no contest clause, meaning that any beneficiary who challenges it automatically forfeits whatever bequest they would have received. What bequest? Brady snapped. You've left us nothing. That's not entirely accurate, Clayton replied, reopening the portfolio. Mrs. Walker is to receive the condo in San Antonio, her personal vehicle, and a cash settlement of $250,000, which reflects the prenuptial agreement's terms for a marriage of this duration. You, Mr. Lewis, are to receive forgiveness of the $175,000 in loans Mr. Walker has provided you over the past 5 years, with no obligation for repayment. The revelation of the loans caused another ripple of whispers. Denise looked at her son in surprise. She clearly hadn't known the full extent of his financial dependence on me. You told me those were investments, she said, her voice barely audible. Brady ignored her, his attention fixed on me. This isn't over, Henry. Actually, Brady, it is, I said, rising from my seat. You have 30 days to vacate the guest house. Denise, you and I can discuss the logistics of separation tomorrow. For now, I think it's best if I close this evening. I turned to the guests, many of whom looked as though they'd rather be anywhere else. I apologize for the disruption to what should have been a celebration. Please enjoy the rest of your meal. The staff will serve dessert shortly. With quiet dignity, I walked out of the banquet hall for the second time that evening, but this time I wasn't alone. Clayton walked beside me, and behind us I heard footsteps. Grandpa? Wait. Maya hurried toward me, her fiancé following close behind. My son Daniel and his wife Jennifer approached from another table. Even my brother Thomas, who rarely involved himself in family drama, rose to join us. As we gathered in the lobby, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. The confrontation had been painful, but the truth was finally in the open, and I wasn't standing alone. The morning. After the disastrous dinner, I sat on my porch watching the sun rise over the hills. The pecan trees Elizabeth and I had planted cast long shadows across the dew-covered grass. In the distance, fog lingered in the valleys, creating an ethereal landscape that seemed disconnected from the human drama unfolding within it. I heard a car approaching and recognized the sound of Maya's old Subaru coming up the drive. She appeared minutes later, carrying 2 coffee cups from the local diner. Figured you might need this, she said, handing me a steaming cup. I added an extra shot. Seemed appropriate. Thank you, I replied, gesturing to the rocking chair beside mine. It's early for you to be up and about. She settled into the chair, wrapping both hands around her own cup. Couldn't sleep much? Too many thoughts. She paused, looking out at the property. I had no idea you were planning to leave the ranch to Daniel Jr. and me. It was always the plan, I said. Even before your grandmother passed. We both wanted this place to stay in the family, to be cared for by people who understand what it means. Why didn't you tell us? I sipped my coffee, considering the question. I suppose I didn't want you to feel burdened by the responsibility until you were ready. And lately, I've been careful about who I share my plans with. She nodded slowly. Because of Brady and Denise? Yes. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching a family of deer emerge from the tree line to graze in the morning light. There's something you should know, Grandpa, Maya finally said. About Brady. He's been approaching investors about developing the ranch for months now. He showed me plans for a wellness retreat with luxury cabins, a spa, even a helicopter pad. Said it was all preliminary, dependent on your approval, of course. I wasn't surprised, but the confirmation still stung. Did he approach your father too? Yes. Dad shut him down immediately, told him it was disrespectful to even suggest it while you were still... She trailed off, looking embarrassed. While I was still alive? I finished for her, smiling slightly. It's okay, Maya. I'm well aware of my mortality. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Brady didn't take it well. He told Dad that you were stuck in the past and wasting the property's potential. Said Denise agreed with him. This revelation hurt more deeply. Despite everything, I'd hoped that some part of Denise had genuinely cared for me, not just what I could provide. Did you ever suspect? Maya asked quietly. Before last night? I nodded. For a while now. Small things at first. Conversations that stopped when I entered a room, mail that had been opened, Brady's sudden interest in my business affairs. Then bigger things. I told her about finding Brady in my study, about the overheard phone call where he'd discussed converting the ranch, about Denise's increasing focus on my estate planning. Why didn't you confront them sooner? Partly because I needed to be certain, partly because I wanted to protect the peace of this place for as long as possible. I gestured toward the rolling hills, and partly because I'm an old man who didn't want to admit he'd been foolish enough to be taken in. You weren't foolish, Grandpa, Maya protested. You were kind. There's a difference. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Daniel. Headed your way with breakfast. ETA 30 minutes. I showed Maya the message, and she smiled. The Walker Crisis Response System in action. Food first, then planning. Sure enough, half an hour later, Daniel's SUV pulled up, followed by Jennifer's car with Daniel Jr. in the passenger seat. They unloaded bags from the local bakery and a cooler of orange juice and champagne. Thought we might need mimosas after last night, Jennifer explained, giving me a warm hug. We set up breakfast on the porch, the impromptu family gathering feeling more right than any of the formal dinners Denise had orchestrated in recent years. Daniel Jr., now 16, helped arrange chairs while recounting the reactions he'd overheard at the dinner after I left. Brady was totally losing it, he reported with the blunt assessment of a teenager. Kept saying you couldn't do this to him, that he'd sue. Then his mom started crying, but like angry crying, you know? And then some of her friends started saying really nasty stuff about you, Grandpa. Daniel, Jennifer admonished gently. Maybe not the best time. It's all right, I assured her. I'd rather know what we're dealing with. Daniel finished setting out the food and sat down beside me. Dad, Clayton called this morning. He said Brady's already been to the guest house and removed some items. He wanted to know if you want to change the locks or have someone monitoring the property. I considered this. Did Clayton say what he took? Mostly his own belongings, apparently, but also some artwork from the main house. Denise let him in before she left for her sister's. I sighed. The artwork was the least of my concerns, but the violation of my home still stung. I'll have the security company change the codes. Today, I decided. And yes, let's change the locks too. Not because I think they'd steal anything significant, but because I need this to be my sanctuary again. As we ate breakfast, the conversation gradually shifted from the immediate crisis to longer-term plans. Maya and her fiancé, Eric, had been considering building a small home of their own, possibly in Austin where they both worked. Now, they discussed the possibility of building on the ranch property instead. There's that beautiful spot near the East Creek, Maya mused. Remember, Grandpa, where we used to have picnics when I was little? The thought of Maya building a life here, raising her own family on this land, brought a peace I hadn't felt in months. It's yours whenever you're ready, I told her. Your grandmother would have loved that. Daniel Jr. perked up. Could I build a tiny house by the pond someday, when I'm older? His parents exchanged amused glances. Let's get you through high school first, Jennifer suggested. As the morning progressed, the weight of betrayal began to lift slightly. Surrounded by family who genuinely cared, not for what I owned, but for who I was, I found myself able to look forward, rather than back. Around noon, my phone rang. Denise's name appeared on the screen. The conversation around the table quieted as I answered. Hello, Denise. Henry. Her voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk about arrangements. I'll be coming by this afternoon to collect my personal items. That would be fine, I replied. Around what time? 2:00. And Henry, I want to explain. About last night. It wasn't what it looked like. I closed my eyes briefly. I think it was exactly what it looked like, Denise. But we can discuss it when you come. Brady won't be with me, she added quickly. I thought that would be easier. Thank you for that consideration. After hanging up, I looked at my family's concerned faces. She's coming at 2 to get her things. Daniel stood. We'll stay with you. I shook my head. No, this is something I need to handle myself. But thank you, all of you, for being here this morning. It means more than you know. After they left, I walked the property alone, gathering my thoughts. The confrontation with Denise would be difficult, but necessary. As I approached the stables where Elizabeth and I had kept horses for decades, I felt a strange sense of her presence, not in any supernatural way, but in the accumulated memories that surrounded me. You were right, I said aloud to the empty stable. You always said I should trust my instincts about people. The breeze stirred the leaves of the nearby oak tree, and for a moment I could almost hear her laughing response. Better late than never, Henry Walker. At precisely 2:00, Denise's silver Mercedes pulled into the driveway. I watched from the living room window as she sat in the car for several minutes, seemingly gathering her courage. When she finally emerged, she was impeccably dressed in a tailored pantsuit, armor for what she must have known would be a difficult conversation. I opened the front door before she could ring the bell. Her expression was a carefully composed mask of dignified regret. "Henry," she said with a slight nod, "thank you for seeing me." "Come in," I replied, stepping aside. The formality between us felt strange after 5 years of marriage, but appropriate given the circumstances. She walked into the house, her gaze sweeping across the entryway as if cataloging what was hers and what wasn't. "I won't take much of your time. I just need my personal items and some family heirlooms." "Of course. I've had Martha box up your clothing and jewelry already. They're in the guest room. As for anything else, you can show me what you consider yours." A flash of irritation crossed her face at the implication that I was monitoring what she took, but she nodded and headed toward the staircase. As we moved through the house, room by room, an awkward silence hung between us. 5 years of shared life was being dismantled in an afternoon. Despite everything, there was a sadness in that fact. In the master bedroom, Denise paused before the photograph of Elizabeth and me on our 30th anniversary, the last one before her diagnosis. I'd never removed it, and to her credit, Denise had never asked me to. She was always here, Denise said quietly, between us. "That's not why we're here today, Denise." She turned, eyes suddenly bright with tears. "Isn't it? You never fully let me in, Henry. Never gave me the chance to be a true partner." "A true partner doesn't conspire with her son to take what isn't theirs," I replied evenly. "That's not what happened," she protested. "Brady just wanted to help modernize the ranch to secure our future. You've been so resistant to change, so unwilling to even discuss alternatives. Alternatives that would have stripped my grandchildren of their inheritance and turned their grandmother's favorite place into a commercial venture." I shook my head. "Don't insult my intelligence, Denise." I heard Brady on the phone. I saw the development plans he was showing to investors. "This wasn't about helping me. It was about helping yourselves." Her composure cracked slightly. "What were we supposed to do? You've kept us at arm's length from your finances, your planning. Brady has talents, vision. He could have transformed this place. Into what? Another soulless resort for the wealthy? That was never going to happen while I'm alive, and I made sure it won't happen afterward, either." She moved to the dresser and began collecting small items. A perfume bottle, a jewelry box I'd given her on our 3rd anniversary, a small silver frame holding a photo of her parents. "Did you ever love me at all?" she asked, her back to me. The question caught me off guard. Despite my anger, I couldn't bring myself to be deliberately cruel. "Yes," I said finally. "I did love you, Denise. Not the same way I loved Elizabeth. That wouldn't have been fair to either of you. But I cared deeply for you. I wanted to build a life with you." She turned, clutching the items to her chest. "Then why didn't you include me in your plans? Why keep me separate from your business, your property decisions? Because from the beginning, you made it clear you wanted more control than I was comfortable giving. Remember when you redecorated Elizabeth's garden room without consulting me? Or when you suggested selling the east pasture to your friend's development company? You never tried to understand what this place means to me, to my family." "Your family," she repeated bitterly. "Brady and I were never truly part of that, were we?" "You could have been," I said. "But Brady never showed any real, interest in the ranch itself, only in what it could be converted into. And you chose his ambitions over our marriage. That became very clear last night." She flinched at the mention of the dinner. "I shouldn't have slapped you. That was unforgivable." "Yes, it was," I agreed. "But it was also clarifying. It showed me exactly where I stood with you." She moved to the closet where Martha had packed her clothes into neat boxes. "I'll need help with these." "I'll have Ramon bring them to your car," I said, referring to the ranch hand who'd worked for me for over a decade. As she gathered the last of her personal items, Denise paused at the bedroom door. "What happens now, Henry?" "Clayton will handle the divorce proceedings. Given the prenuptial agreement, it should be straightforward. You'll get what was specified: the condo, your car, and the settlement. Brady has 30 days to vacate the guest house." She nodded slowly. "And us? Is there anything left to salvage?" I looked at this woman who had shared my bed, my home, and my life for 5 years. There was still a fondness there, buried beneath the betrayal. but there was no path back. I think we both know the answer to that. Denise. Some broken things can't be fixed. She straightened her shoulders, dignity returning to her posture. For what it's worth, Henry, I am sorry for how things ended. Not all of our marriage was a calculation. I'd like to believe that, I said. After Ramon had loaded the boxes into her car, Denise stood on the porch for a final moment. The afternoon sun caught the silver in her hair, reminding me of how beautiful I'd once found her. Goodbye, Henry, she said softly. Goodbye, Denise. I watched her drive away, feeling a complex mixture of relief, sadness, and resolution. One chapter of my life was ending, but I was determined that the next one would be written on my own terms. Later that evening, as I sat alone on the porch with a glass of bourbon, headlights appeared on the driveway again. This time, it was Clayton's car. Hope I'm not intruding, he said as he approached, carrying a leather portfolio. Thought you might want an update. Never an intrusion, I assured him, gesturing to the adjacent chair. What's happening? Brady's attorney called my office this afternoon. They're posturing about contesting the will, but it's just noise. Given the documentation we, have and the timing of the changes, they don't have a case. I nodded, unsurprised. And Denise? Her attorney is more reasonable. They've indicated she'll accept the terms of the prenuptial agreement without contest, provided we don't pursue any claims related to Brady's loans or the artwork they removed this morning. That's acceptable, I said. I'm not interested in a protracted legal battle. I just want closure. Clayton set the portfolio on the small table between us. There's something else you should know. I had my investigator look into Brady's recent activities as you requested. He's been meeting with developers for months, showing them surveys of your property. He even had preliminary permits drawn up in his name. The audacity was breathtaking. He really believed he could convince me to sign everything over, didn't he? Or bypass you entirely, Clayton said grimly. There were draft documents for power of attorney in Denise's possession. Nothing executed, but it suggests they may have been considering more aggressive options if you became incapacitated. A chill ran through me despite the warm evening. You think they would have gone that far? Clayton shrugged. Hard to say. People can rationalize remarkable things when money is involved. But it's moot now. You've protected yourself and your legacy. We sat in contemplative silence for a while, watching the fireflies begin to emerge in the gathering dusk. Finally, Clayton spoke again. What will you do now, Henry? The house will feel empty without them. I considered the question, looking out over the land that had sustained me through so much. Not empty. Peaceful. I think I'll focus on spending time with my grandchildren. Maya and Eric are talking about building a small house on the property. Daniel Jr. wants to learn more about running the ranch. Sounds like a good plan, Clayton said, rising to leave. And if you ever get lonely, Nancy and I are always up for a dinner guest. She still talks about your chili recipe. I smiled at the mention of his wife, a warm-hearted woman who'd been kind to me after Elizabeth's passing. I'd like that. After Clayton left, I remained on the porch, thinking about the future. At 70, I was under no illusions about how much time I had left, but for perhaps the first time since Elizabeth died, I felt a sense of purpose again. The ranch would continue. The legacy would endure, and I would spend whatever years remained making sure that those who truly cared for this land, and for me, would be the ones to carry it forward. The summer heat gave way to a mild Texas fall. The changing seasons seemed fitting as my life settled into new patterns. Brady vacated the guest house without further confrontation, though he left it in deplorable condition, a final act of petty revenge that said more about his character than he probably realized. I hired a cleaning crew and then decided to renovate it entirely, transforming it into a space for Maya and Eric until their own home could be built. The divorce proceedings moved forward efficiently. Denise didn't contest any terms, and through our attorneys, we arranged for the division of our shared life with minimal direct contact. Occasionally, I would see her name in the society pages of the local newspaper, attending gallery openings or charity events, rebuilding her life separate from mine. On a crisp October morning, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing architectural plans with Maya and Eric. They had worked with a designer to create a modest but beautiful home that would nestle into the eastern hillside, with large windows facing the sunrise. "What do you think, Grandpa?" Maya asked, pointing to the wraparound porch design. We were inspired by the main house, but wanted something with our own style, too. I studied the plans, appreciating the thoughtfulness behind each detail. The house would be modern yet appropriate for the ranch setting, with sustainable features that, reflected Maya's environmental values. It's perfect, I said sincerely. Your grandmother would have loved it. Eric, a quiet, intelligent man who taught engineering at the university, pointed to a small outbuilding on the plans. We included a workshop space here. I thought maybe you and I could use it together. I've always wanted to learn woodworking. The gesture touched me deeply. In the months since the family dinner, Eric had made consistent efforts to connect with me, not out of obligation to Maya, but with genuine interest. We discovered a shared love of historical biographies and Texas barbecue techniques. I'd like that very much, I told him, though I should warn you I'm a demanding teacher. He grinned. Maya warned me. She said you made her redo a fence post 3 times when she was 14, and it's still standing straight after 10 years of Texas storms, I pointed out, winking at my granddaughter. Exactly why I want to learn from you, Eric replied. After they left with the approved plans, I walked the property, eventually making my way to the small hill where Elizabeth was buried. The family plot held generations of walkers, including my parents and Elizabeth's. Someday, I would join them. I sat on the stone bench we'd placed beside Elizabeth's grave, brushing fallen leaves from the marble marker. You'd like Eric, I said aloud, a habit I'd never broken. He reminds me a bit of your brother James. Quiet on the surface, but with a sharp mind underneath. They're planning a spring wedding, right here on the ranch. A gentle breeze stirred the nearby cypress trees, their feathery leaves catching the afternoon light. Maya asked if I'd be okay with them using your garden for the ceremony. I told her you'd have insisted on it. I paused, feeling the familiar mixture of sadness and comfort that these one-sided conversations always brought. She wants to incorporate some of your favorite flowers, said it would be like having you there. I sat in silence for a while, thinking about how life continues to unfold in unexpected ways. The pain of Denise's betrayal was still there, but it had been overshadowed by the joy of reconnecting with my family, of seeing the ranch through their eyes again. When I returned to the house, I found Daniel Jr. waiting on the porch, his father's truck parked in the drive. Dad got caught up at work, he explained. But I didn't want to miss our writing lesson. At 16, Daniel Jr. was tall and lanky, still growing into his frame. He had his grandmother's quiet determination and his father's analytical mind. Unlike many teenagers, he seemed genuinely interested in learning the practical skills of ranch management. Let's head to the stables, I said. Thunder's been waiting for you. We spent the afternoon checking fence lines on horseback, with me pointing out property boundaries and water sources. Daniel Jr. asked thoughtful questions about grazing rotation and sustainable land management. Do you think we could restore some of the native grasses in the south pasture? He asked as we rode back toward the stables. I've been reading about how they're more drought-resistant and better. For carbon sequestration. I looked at him with newfound respect. You've been doing research. He shrugged, a hint of color rising in his cheeks. I figured if I'm going to help take care of this place someday, I should understand it better. That's exactly right, I said, feeling a surge of pride. And yes, I think native grass restoration is an excellent idea. Why don't you put together a proposal? We could start a pilot project next spring? His face lit up. Really? You'd let me take the lead on that? With supervision, I clarified. But yes, this ranch will be yours and Maya's responsibility someday. It's never too early to start taking ownership. As we unsaddled the horses and brushed them down, I found myself thinking about the contrast between Daniel Jr.'s approach and Brady's. One saw the land as something to steward and improve, the other had seen it only as an asset to exploit. The difference wasn't just in their relationship to me, but in their fundamental character. That evening, Clayton and his wife Nancy came for dinner. Martha, who had been my housekeeper for nearly a decade, prepared her famous pot roast and pecan pie. The conversation flowed easily, touching on local politics, Clayton's plans for partial retirement, and Nancy's Master Gardener program at the community college. During dessert, Clayton brought up the divorce. It was finalized this morning. The judge signed off on everything as we presented it. So it's done, I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. No more legal battles. None on that front, Clayton confirmed. Though I should mention that Brady has apparently relocated to Houston. He's telling people he's starting a property development company focused on transforming underutilized rural estates. Nancy frowned. That sounds like he's still fixated on your land, Henry. He can fixate all he wants, I replied. The ranch is protected now. Besides, I doubt investors will line up behind someone with his track record of failed ventures. Clayton nodded in agreement. The trust structure is solid. Even if, God forbid, something happened to you tomorrow, Maya and Daniel Jr. are well protected. After they left, I poured myself a small whiskey and took it out to the porch. The night was clear, stars spreading across the Texas sky in a dazzling display that city dwellers rarely experience. An owl called from the distant woods, and somewhere, a coyote answered. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Plans submitted to the county today. Eric says thanks for the advice on the septic system placement. Love you, Grandpa. I smiled, typing back. Proud of you both. Let me know when they approve and we'll break ground. As I sat there, I reflected on how different my life looked now compared to a year ago. The betrayal had been painful, but it had also been clarifying, showing me who truly belonged in my inner circle and who had been merely waiting for what they could get from me. More importantly, it had reconnected me with what mattered most. This land, the legacy Elizabeth and I had built, the family we had created together. Brady and Denise had seen only the material value of what I owned. They had never understood that the real wealth was in the connections, the history, the sense of continuity across generations. The next morning, I met with Ramon and the other ranch hands to discuss the coming winter preparations. We needed to repair several outbuildings, stockpile feed, and service the equipment before the occasional Texas freezes arrived. Mr. Walker, Ramon said as our meeting concluded, my nephew Pablo just graduated from agricultural college. He's looking for work, and I thought, with all the new projects you're planning, maybe you could use another hand. I considered the request. Ramon had been loyal for years, and expansion did make sense with Maya's construction beginning and Daniel Jr.'s grassland restoration project on the horizon. Have him come by. Next week, I decided. If he's half as hardworking as you, we'll find a place for him. Ramon's face broke into a wide smile. Thank you, sir. He won't disappoint you. As the men dispersed to their tasks, I found myself energized rather than exhausted by the plans taking shape. At 70, I was starting new projects, expanding operations, looking toward a future I might not fully see but could help shape. That afternoon, I called my old friend Gerald, who had retired from teaching at the local community college. How'd you like to help Daniel Jr. with a native grassland project? I asked after we'd caught up on each other's news. Your grandson? Gerald sounded intrigued. What's he got in mind? I explained Daniel Jr.'s ideas, and Gerald, who had a background in ecology before switching to history, grew increasingly animated. Henry, that's exactly the kind of project these ranches need. The Blackland Prairie ecosystem has been reduced to less than 1% of its original area. If you're serious about this, I'd love to be involved. Come to dinner next Friday, I suggested. You can talk to him directly. As I hung up, I realized I was building something new. Not just structures on the land, but a community of people who cared about the ranch's future. People who saw its value beyond dollars and cents. The wounds of betrayal were healing, replaced by the satisfaction of genuine connection. The ranch wasn't just surviving, it was evolving, just as I was. A full year passed since that fateful dinner. The Texas landscape transformed through seasons. Winter's brief, chill giving way to a vibrant spring, then the scorching summer, and now another golden autumn. The ranch transformed too, not just physically but in spirit. Maya and Eric's house stood completed on the eastern hillside, a harmonious blend of modern design and traditional ranch aesthetics. Their wedding had taken place in May, a joyful celebration beneath the pecan trees. I had walked Maya down the aisle, my heart full as we passed through Elizabeth's garden, where white roses bloomed as if offering their blessing. Daniel Jr.'s grassland restoration project had expanded from a small test plot to nearly 40 acres. Under Gerald's mentorship, he had secured a grant from a conservation organization, bringing recognition to the ranch as a model for sustainable land management. Now, 17. He spent every weekend and school holiday at the ranch, his bedroom in the main house filled with botany textbooks and soil sample reports. On this particular October afternoon, I sat in the workshop with Eric, putting the finishing touches on a cradle. Maya was expecting their first child in December, a girl they planned to name Elizabeth Rose. Your dovetail joints have improved, I noted as Eric carefully sanded the headboard. Even better than mine now, he smiled, pleased with the praise. I had a good teacher. Think she'll like it? She'll love it, I assured him, knowing we were talking about both Maya and the future granddaughter who would sleep in this cradle. 4 generations of walkers, all connected to this land. That's something special. As we worked, Ramon's knocked on the open door. Mr. Walker, there's someone here to see you. A Ms. Lewis? I paused, chisel in hand. Brady's mother? Ramon nodded. She's waiting on the front porch. I hadn't seen Carolyn Lewis in years, not since before my marriage to Denise. Brady's father had left them when Brady was young, and Carolyn had raised him alone, a fact that had always garnered my sympathy, especially given how difficult a child Brady must have been. I'll be right there, I told Ramon, then turned to Eric. Would you mind finishing up here? Of course not, he replied. Take your time. I found Carolyn sitting in one of the rocking chairs, looking older than her 75 years. Her once auburn hair was now completely white, her face lined with what appeared to be both age and worry. Henry, she said, rising slowly as I approached. Thank you for seeing me. I wasn't sure if you would. Carolyn, I acknowledged, gesturing for her to sit again. It's been a long time. Too long. She settled back into the chair, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. I've wanted to come for months now, but I wasn't sure I'd be welcome. After what Brady and Denise did. That wasn't your doing, I said simply, taking the chair beside hers. She looked out over the ranch, taking in the autumn colors, the distant sight of Maya's new house, the cattle grazing peacefully in the lower pasture. This place is even more beautiful than I remembered. What brings you here today, Carolyn? I asked gently. She turned to face me directly. I wanted to apologize, Henry, for my son's behavior, for not raising him to be a better man. Her voice broke slightly. And to warn you. Warn me? She nodded, her expression grave. Brady's been talking about the ranch again. He's obsessed with it, convinced it should have been his. He's been meeting with some investors from Dallas, telling them he has a legal strategy to claim a portion of it. I sighed. Clayton assured me that's not possible. The trust is solid. I know, that's what I tried to tell him. But he won't listen. She hesitated. He's not well, Henry. He's drinking too much, making wild claims. Last month, he showed up at my apartment at midnight, ranting about how you'd stolen his future. The news troubled me, not out of fear for myself, but out of concern for what Brady might do in such a state. Have you spoken to Denise about this? Carolyn's expression tightened. They barely speak anymore. She's remarried, you know. Some art dealer from Santa Fe. They moved there about 4 months ago. This was news to me, though not surprising. Denise had always loved the art scene in New Mexico. I found I had no negative feelings about her remarriage, only hope that perhaps she'd found someone who shared her genuine interests, rather than just seeing her as a path to wealth. I'm sorry to burden you with this, Carolyn continued, but I thought you should know. Brady's always been difficult, but this is different. There's a desperation to him now. Thank you for coming, I said sincerely. I appreciate the warning. I'll speak to Clayton about additional security measures. She looked relieved. That would be wise. She paused, then added, There's one more thing. Brady doesn't know I'm here, and he wouldn't forgive me if he found out. But I brought something I think belongs here. From her large handbag, she withdrew a carefully wrapped object. As she unfolded the tissue paper, I recognized Elizabeth's silver picture frame, the one that had gone missing during Denise's final removal of her belongings. I found it among Brady's things when I was helping him move apartments, Carolyn explained. I recognized it immediately. Elizabeth showed it to me once, told me it was a family heirloom from her grandmother. I took the frame gently, running my thumb over the ornate silver. Inside was a faded photograph of Elizabeth on our wedding day, her smile radiant. Thank you, Carolyn. This means a great deal to me. She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. I want you to know, I never raised him to be this way. I tried to teach him about hard work, about earning his place in the world. Somewhere along the way, he decided there were shortcuts. We can guide our children, I said, but ultimately they make their own choices. After Carolyn left, I called Clayton and informed him of her visit. He promised to review our security protocols and check if Brady had indeed filed any legal challenges. That evening, the family gathered for dinner at the main house. Daniel and Jennifer, Maya and Eric, and Daniel Jr., who was excitedly sharing the latest data from his grassland project. The biodiversity metrics are incredible, Grandpa, he explained between bites of Martha's beef stew. We've documented 27 species of native plants returning to the test plots, and the insect populations are booming. Which means more birds, Maya added, her hand resting on her growing belly. I've seen 3 pairs of meadowlarks near our place this week. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on Daniel's work promotion, Jennifer's community garden initiative, and Eric's upcoming Faculty review. I sat at the head of the table, taking it all in. The easy laughter, the supportive comments, the obvious love that connected everyone present. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee and Martha's apple pie, I found myself thinking about Carolyn's visit and what it represented. Brady was still fixated on possessing the ranch, seeing it only as a financial asset. Yet, here in this room was the true value of what Elizabeth and I had built. A family bonded not just by blood or legal documents, but by shared values and genuine care for one another. "Everything okay, Dad?" Daniel asked, noticing my momentary distraction. I smiled, returning to the present. "More than okay," I assured him, just counting my blessings. Later, I showed them Elizabeth's recovered silver frame, now restored to its place on my bedside table. Maya traced the delicate pattern with her finger. "I remember this," she said softly. "Grandma used to let me hold it when I was little, but only if I sat very still on her lap. She'd be so proud of you," I told her. "Of all of you." As the evening wound down, I walked everyone to their cars, standing on the porch as taillights disappeared down the long driveway. The autumn air had a crispness that promised winter wasn't far behind, but inside I felt only warmth. Back in the quiet house, I placed a call to an old friend at the sheriff's department, quietly arranging for additional patrols past the ranch entrance. Brady's obsession was unlikely to manifest in anything beyond talk, but Carolyn's warning deserved respect. Protection, I reflected as I prepared for bed, took many forms. Legal documents secured the ranch's future. Family bonds secured its heart. And vigilance would secure its peace. Spring came again to the Oak Hill Ranch, bringing with it the sweet scent of bluebonnets and the gentle cooing of mourning doves. Elizabeth Rose Walker, now 4 months old, lay on a blanket beneath the shade of a pecan tree, gurgling happily as butterflies danced in the dappled sunlight above her. Maya sat nearby, working on her laptop while keeping a watchful eye on her daughter. I approached with 2 glasses of iced tea, smiling at the domestic scene. "How's my favorite great-granddaughter today?" Maya laughed. "Your only great-granddaughter, Grandpa?" "For now," I replied, nodding toward her laptop. "Working. On Saturday, final revisions to my conservation proposal," she explained, accepting the tea gratefully. "If it goes through, we could expand Daniel's grassland project across the entire eastern section." "He'll be thrilled," I said, carefully lowering myself onto the blanket beside little Elizabeth. At 72, my joints protested more than they once had, but the joy of sitting with my great-granddaughter made any discomfort worthwhile. Elizabeth reached for my finger, her grip surprisingly strong for such tiny hands. Her eyes, Elizabeth's eyes, seemed to study me with ancient wisdom. "She knows you," Maya observed. "Watch how she smiles when you talk." "That's because I tell her all the best stories," I said, tickling Elizabeth's belly gently. "Isn't that right, little one? Stories about brave grandmothers and pecan trees, and the stars over Texas." The past 18 months had brought profound changes to the ranch and to my life. Brady's threats, amplified by Carolyn's warning, had initially caused concern. Clayton had strengthened legal protections around the trust, and we'd installed a more comprehensive security system. But in the end, Brady's legal strategy had amounted to nothing more than a desperate letter from a third-rate attorney, easily dismissed by Clayton's firm. The last I'd heard, Brady had moved to Florida, working for a timeshare company and telling exaggerated stories about the Texas ranch empire that should have been his. Denise, according to mutual acquaintances, seemed content in her new life in Santa Fe, her gallery connections finally utilized in a meaningful career rather than just social advancement. Their absence had created space for healing and growth. The ranch operations had expanded, with Daniel Jr.'s conservation work drawing attention from environmental groups and agricultural programs. Maya had reduced her hours at the environmental consulting firm to balance motherhood with managing the ranch's new sustainability initiatives. And I had found unexpected purpose in mentoring both my grandchildren and Ramon's nephew, Pablo, who had proven to be an exceptionally talented ranch manager. "Dad called this morning," Maya said, interrupting my thoughts. "He and Mom will be here next weekend to help with the foundation event." The Elizabeth Walker Memorial Foundation for Foster Youth had grown substantially, now offering scholarships, mentorship programs, and transitional housing for young adults aging out of the foster system. Our annual fundraiser, held on the ranch, had become a community tradition. "We'll need to finalize the speaker lineup," I noted, "and make sure the new parking area is ready." "Already handled," Maya assured me. "Eric marked it out yesterday, and Ramon's team will grade it on Monday." A comfortable silence fell between us, broken only by Elizabeth's happy babbling and the distant lowing of cattle. The ranch had always been beautiful, but now it seemed to radiate with renewed purpose. Each acre not just preserved but enhanced, not just maintained but evolved. "I've been thinking," Maya said after a while, "about adding a small educational center near the grassland. Project. Something where school groups could come learn about native ecosystems, sustainable ranching, maybe even the history of the land. We could name it after you and Grandma." The suggestion touched me deeply. I think she would have loved that. She always said this land should teach as well as nourish. That's what I remember about her most, Maya said softly. How she turned everything into a lesson, but never made it feel like one. The way she could point out a tiny wildflower and suddenly you'd understand an entire ecosystem. I nodded, memories washing over me like gentle waves. She had that gift. Elizabeth began to fuss slightly, and Maya lifted her daughter into her arms. "Someone's ready for her nap. Want to walk us back to the house?" As we strolled along the path connecting Maya's home to the main house, I reflected on how the property had transformed. What had once been a single-family home was now becoming a small community. Maya and Eric's house on the eastern rise, Daniel Jr.'s research cabin near the restored grasslands, and plans for a modest retirement cottage for Daniel and Jennifer in the coming years. The ranch was evolving from a single man's legacy into a living, growing extension of the family itself. That evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The phone call with Clayton earlier had brought news that the last of Brady's legal posturings had been dismissed. The ranch was secure, its future certain. As darkness fell, Daniel Jr. joined me, returning from his evening inspection of the grassland. Plots. At 18, he was now a young man, preparing to leave for college in the fall. "The fireflies are out early this year," he observed, dropping into the chair beside mine. "Grandma used to say that meant good luck." "She did," I confirmed, smiling at the memory. She had a saying for every natural occurrence. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you ever regret it, Grandpa? Marrying Denise? After everything that happened?" The question surprised me, but I gave it honest consideration. "No," I said finally. "I regret that she and Brady weren't who I thought they were. But the experience clarified what matters most. Sometimes we need contrast to see things clearly." He nodded thoughtfully. "The native grasses show their best colors after a controlled burn. The old growth has to, clear for the new to thrive." "Exactly right," I said, impressed by the maturity of his insight. "And look what's grown since then. Your project, Maya's family, this sense of purpose we all share." The distant rumble of a vehicle caught our attention. Headlights appeared on the long driveway, and soon Eric's truck pulled up. He emerged carrying takeout bags from the barbecue place in town. "Thought you might be hungry," he called as he approached the porch. "Martha's off tonight, and Maya said you two would probably forget to eat while discussing grass species or whatever it is you do out here." Daniel Jr. laughed. "She knows us too well." As we moved inside to eat, the house felt warm and lived in. No longer the empty shell it had been after Elizabeth died, nor the artificially curated showcase it had become during Denise's tenure. It was simply home, comfortable, imperfect, filled with photographs of family, both past and present. Over dinner, Daniel Jr. shared his plans for expanding the conservation area during his summer breaks from college. Eric discussed the woodworking classes he'd begun teaching at the community center. I listened contentedly, offering occasional advice but mostly just enjoying their enthusiasm. Later, after they had gone, I found myself alone in my study, looking at the framed deed to Oak Hill Ranch that hung on the wall. The document represented not just ownership of land, but stewardship of a legacy. Brady had seen only its monetary value. Denise had viewed it as a status symbol. But my grandchildren understood its true worth as a living connection to the past and a promise to the future. The following Sunday, the entire family gathered for dinner at the main house. Maya and Eric brought little Elizabeth, dressed in a sunflower-patterned outfit that brought out the golden flecks in her eyes. Daniel and Jennifer arrived with news of Jennifer's community garden being selected for a state award. Daniel Jr. brought Gerald and his wife Alice, eager to discuss the latest research findings from the Grassland Project. After dinner, as twilight settled over the ranch, we all moved to the back porch. The men built a fire in the stone pit Elizabeth and I had designed together decades ago. The women arranged chairs in a semicircle, with Maya passing Elizabeth from lap to lap, each family member delighting in the baby's smiles and curious expressions. I stood slightly apart, watching them all. My son and his wife, my granddaughter and her husband, my grandson on the cusp of adulthood, and the newest walker, just beginning her journey. They were engaged in animated conversation, laughing and debating and planning together. This, I realized, was what Brady and Denise could never understand. They had seen the ranch as property to be acquired, as a prize to be won. They had never grasped that its true value lay not in its acreage or its market worth, but in its ability to nurture connection across generations. I joined the circle, accepting the chair they had saved for me. As the conversation flowed around me, I felt a profound sense of peace. The betrayal that had once seemed so devastating had, in fact, cleared the way for this renaissance, this return to what the ranch was always meant to be. "Grandpa," Maya said, passing Elizabeth into my arms, "tell us the story of how you and Grandma found this place." "Again?" I teased. "You've all heard it a dozen times." "It's Elizabeth's first time," Daniel pointed out, nodding toward the baby now contentedly nestled against my chest. "Well, in that case," I said, settling more comfortably into my chair, "it was the summer of 1975, and your grandmother had just inherited a small sum from her aunt." As I recounted the familiar tale of our first sight of the oak-covered hills, of Elizabeth's immediate certainty that this was where we belonged, I watched my family's faces in the firelight. Each of them knew the story by heart, yet they listened with genuine interest, occasionally interjecting with questions or favorite details I might have missed. In my arms, little Elizabeth's eyes grew heavy, lulled by the rhythm of my voice and the security of family surrounding her. Soon she was asleep, her tiny hand curled against my weathered one. The contrast wasn't lost on me, her life just beginning, mine in its final chapters. But there was no sadness in the recognition, only gratitude for the continuity she represented. Long after I was gone, she would walk these hills, perhaps sit under the very trees her great-grandmother and I had planted, and know that she belonged to this place as much as it belonged to her. The betrayal I had experienced at that fateful dinner had been painful but ultimately purifying. It had stripped away pretense and calculation, leaving only what was genuine and true. The slap that had echoed through that banquet hall had, in its own way, awakened me to the difference between those who valued me for what I had and those who valued me for who I was. As the stars emerged in the Texas sky, I looked at my family, my true family, and knew with absolute certainty that Elizabeth would have approved of how things had turned out. The ranch was secure, the legacy would continue, and love, not greed, would guide its future.